What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Halo Rant YouTube channel, where today we're going to be going over what the elites desperately need in Halo Infinite. Now, we know that the elites aren't going to be playable, but they're still clearly an integral part of the game, obviously being part of the banished faction and so on. But we sort of want to get into whether their role is going to differ from previous games. Could the Arbiter play a role in any way within this game? But without further ado, let's get into it.
So first off, we need to discuss how the elites are aesthetically. And from what we've seen so far with the infinite footage, 343 do seem to be doing quite well with their current designs, but we haven't seen that much yet. And there's still key things which, from what we're seeing with the elite miners so far, is good, but then later on we could kind of start seeing what happened in Halo Reach, where the armor started getting a bit less elite, a bit less, that kind of stealthy design that we saw in the earlier Halos, where they were almost like assassins. You could see them with their active camos on, with all that sort of stuff, and actually sneaking around and assassinating targets, or using the energy sword and actually being able to use it without clunky armor that's getting in the way. As well, I feel that the elites need to, they need to lose a bit of weight. I'm happy with there being the new design elite in the game, but it needs to be reserved for the lower ranking, less skilled elites. I don't want to see, especially characters like Arbiter, who are meant to be these incredible like soldiers, and they're walking around like elephants, making a ton of noise. It doesn't matter if you've got an active camo module, because just the sheer size of them and the noise that they make, you're gonna know they're there anyway. And with the armors as well, having I think there's a difference between the elaborate designs we saw in, especially in Halo 2. I feel the elaborate designs we saw in there, and even Halo 3, versus what we kind of saw in Halo 4 and 5, with just, oh, your higher rank just means you have more bulk. You just have more metal attached to you.
Yeah, I think just going over that like with a bit of a sort of summary in terms of how they look aesthetically, you just want a more sort of sleek sort of design to them. But you want something more classic, which obviously Halo Infinite has been really hammering home. And realistically, what they've shown is it's relatively good to see because when 343 first took over, we obviously had like elephants walking around, just this stupidly large armor. And as you mentioned before, Arbiter, like he basically changed species. Like the armor that was bestowed to him in Halo 5 was crazy by comparison. So if they do introduce him back into the game, you've got to think that they'll probably change that slightly. But leading on from that, one thing I do slightly fear more so is not how they look aesthetically, but more how they're going to behave. Because there's been a lot of sort of examples of the brutes acting in a very sort of ferocious and very brutish way, which is good. But we don't really know how the elites are going to behave yet. We haven't seen any sort of specific character or anything like that to interact with yet. And I sort of feel that they might just take up this brute role and just sort of be like a subpar sort of enemy to the brutes, which would be not concerning, but it would really change up how the other Halos have gone.
Yeah, no, I don't want to see the elites just be another rendition of the brutes. They need to kind of keep that side to them where they are a lot more. I don't really know what the word is for it, but they're not quite they're not brutish like the brutes. They are, they live up to their name. They are elite. They are kind of almost like higher ups in society type thing. They're kind of they I don't think necessarily they need to be like snobby or anything, but they kind of have standards, and they expect people to adhere to them standards a bit more so than the brutes, which could even result in quite interesting conflicts with the brutes. Because I mean, we've seen the conflict between the elites and the brutes before with the Great Schism,
Yeah.
and I mean that's still in recent memory. That's happened in the last kind of decade for in terms of Halo's lore. So seeing tensions between the brutes and the elites over the Great Schism and the kind of racial divide between them could actually be quite an interesting thing to see. I would like to see kind of, maybe while you're just exploring the Halo ring, you just kind of come across an elite and a brute that are just squabbling.
Yeah, I wonder if they will actually touch on that within the game, like the Great Schism. Because from what we've seen with the Banished before, they are just one united front. They were just a united force against the prophets themselves. So they weren't really involved within that conflict. So I'm not sure if that's something that they will touch on, if they've heard about it happening to the Covenant. It would be interesting, especially if somebody like the Arbiter, as we said earlier, does get involved, because in terms of like an actual influence, there isn't many bigger in that race that we know of anyway that would be able to influence other elites in the
Well,
same manner that he does.
just in terms of a character that has been screwed over by the events of the Great Schism, the Arbiter is up there as one of the most affected. He was basically tortured by the brutes and then used on suicide missions by the prophets who knew they were going to betray him. And when he didn't die, the prophets just made the brutes try, or made Tartarus try and kill him anyway. So it is kind of a situation where I can definitely see Arbiter having kind of trust issues with the brutes, even the ones that weren't necessarily involved in the Great Schism.
Yeah, but if the elites that are members of the banished like force are unaware of this sort of, well, the Great Schism, could that cause like an echo effect? Could that cause another sort of potential conflict, just showing how quickly that they were to screw them over, even though
Yeah.
it was sort of profit based? It's interesting. It could happen.
Oh yeah, definitely. You could definitely see. I mean, there's even potential for the opposite of it to happen, where the elites kick the brutes out
Yeah,
and kind of try and overthrow Atriox and all of his henchmen. I don't think they're going to do that, but that's still kind of an interesting avenue to explore, I think.
yeah. There's certainly, regardless of where they go with it, there is tension between those two species, and rightly so, because one tried to kick the shit out of the other.
Yeah. I think kind of moving on from that as well. With the elites, there's definitely a lot greater focus on the actual ranks. While the brutes did have various different ranks of chieftain and all that, it was pretty much mainly you're otherwise a basic brute, a squad leader, or a chieftain. There were ones in between, but they were all kind of still roughly the same thing. Whereas the elites, you've had this broad spectrum of ranks pretty much since the first Halo game, to be honest. And I'd like to see them kind of clearly denoted and kind of both visually with armor colors and armor styles,
Yeah,
and also with maybe even the fatter 343 style elites, other lower ranking ones, and with a lot of their interactions as well. I want to see high ranking elites commanding lower ranking elites, and different elites like commanding grunts, maybe even a high ranking grunt ultra or something starts getting a bit backhandy with a low ranking elite because he's like, oh well, I'm a high rank. You might be an elite, but I'm still a high rank, so clear off kind of thing. I don't know.
yeah.
There's a lot of potential there. I feel.
Oh, definitely. Just going on a little bit, the 343 elites, like the fatty elephant ones, they're meant to be like a subspecies, right? Or like a
Yeah.
slightly varied sort of species, aren't they? So yeah, there is potential to see both sort of 343 and Bungie iterations in this game, which is really cool. I'm not sure if 343 are going to go with this within Infinite, but it does open up bags of sort of potential, not only in terms of armors and that, but in terms of like potential elite conflict with elite conflict. Like there's loads of different avenues they can go down. But just moving on from that slightly, I want to touch on the season 7 MCC update, because that is all about the elites, and I think that there is a lot of customization that we will see in Infinite. Because if not, I can't understand why they would go to all that trouble of making all of the custom armors and custom sort of energy swords and so on and so on. Unless if it was something that we could see in Infinite at a later date,
But
whether they're playable or not, like later down the line. We know they're not going to be at launch, but
that's the thing. Like, there is always potential for it to come after launch. I'm not up to us. I'm not expecting it until we get some sort of confirmation where they say yes, we will bring playable elites to the game in the season 5 update or whatever they do. But it is kind of weird that they've said in Halo Infinite there's going to be no armor customization, and then they've gone back to MCC and kind of had an entire update themed around it. it does make you wonder kind of what is their plans for the elites right now.
Just to go back to the potential conflict within the Banished, I'm wondering if there'll be any sort of heretic sort of groups made, like in a similar sort of vein to what we saw in Halo 2, where they sort of sack it all off and just end up sort of trying to learn more about the Forerunner sort of structures. Because we are obviously set on Zeta Halo, and there's a lot of potential for shit to go wrong on there. It could be interesting from a narrative perspective as to where we're going to actually go.
Yeah, there's certainly potential with that. I feel like though with a heretic faction, there would kind of be the opposite, kind of the opposite agenda you saw with the heretic faction in Halo 2. Because the one with Halo 2, you had them kind of exposing the truth about what the prophets have been saying and proving that they have been lying. Whereas the Banished, while ruthless and savage and all that, they don't tend to be liars as such. But I think you could then potentially have maybe kind of like with the remnants of the Covenant we saw in 4 and 5, factions that still believe in the Great Journey and still think the Great Journey is a thing and are trying to maybe even potentially activate Zeta Halo. That would definitely be a more elite focused faction, I feel as well, because the elites in terms of the Covenant were a lot more religious focused.
Yeah.
That they put a lot more honor and pride into the religious side of the Covenant, whereas the Brutes didn't really give a shit. Yeah, I think as well if they did do, or if they do have these like different factions of elites, so you've kind of maybe got arbiters, allied elites, and the banished elites, and then the heretic or covenant or whatever. They need to distinguish them with like completely different armor sets because they saw they saw the need for that in Halo 2. The Halo 2 you literally had what only half a dozen elite armors and one of them was dedicated to just the heretic elites. But then in Halo 5 when you were fighting alongside Arbiter's forces, they're wearing the same armor as the guys you're fighting.
Yeah, no, that is true.
And all right, yeah, they're in red and the guys you're fighting are in like blues and purples and all that, but it's still like confusing. You quickly just turn around and you see the silhouette of a elite running at you. You're gonna shoot because you think you're about to get attacked, but it turns out no, he's on your side. So yeah, I definitely think if they do have different factions with the same species, they need to be not just for the elites, but just in general, they need to be distinguishable.
Yeah, just for the sake of actual gameplay. And again, that might tie into the new Elite Armors they've released in MCC, like in the latest season. We don't know. They might come up with more original concepts. But it's definitely an interesting discussion to have as to where they're actually going to take the elites because they're not at the forefront in terms of the enemy this time. Like it is the brutes. So I don't know. There's plenty of ways they could go with it.
I would definitely like to say, kind of wrapping this up. While we have seen a lot of really cool brute, like kind of boss designs or whatever, I hope there's at least one or two elites as well. I don't want it to just be 100% all brutes and the elites are just kind of an enemy that's thrown in there occasionally just when the sandbox feels like it.
Yeah.
The elites do have a big say in what happens in the Banished, and I do want that to be represented in this game.
I think we will see that. I mean, again, I don't remember the guy's name. There's a lot of spacey themed names in Halo. I'm sure that we saw an elite a few months ago that had a red sword and like a metal robot arm, and he was some sort of elite of importance. I honestly can't remember his name, but I'm sure that there will be sort of actual players in terms of the elite force. It's just whether they'll be represented as much as you would want them to be.
Yeah, yeah. There's certainly a lot of potential there with character design and all that.
But yeah, I suppose that's about all we've got. Sorry, this one got a little bit rambly, but thanks ever so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Let us know what you think the elites need, because they are still an important faction within this big banished group. So yeah, hopefully they're represented correctly. But yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one very soon.
Thank you guys ever so much for watching.